Today in the shop, we've got this blown-up 2004 6.0 Powerstroke, and we want to address a common issue that a lot of you guys might have if you have this particular rod.
Yeah, we don't want to be the bearer of bad news. It's not a good way to start the day, but unfortunately, if you've got the 6.0 Powerstroke, you're either going to have this problem or it's going to happen. It's either happening right now or it's going to. It's an EGR failure, and usually the result of that is going to be catastrophic.
Now, the EGR, simply put, is the exhaust gas recirculation system, right? And the EGR cooler is right here. That's this piece. Now, this goes in and hooks in right on the up pipe on the exhaust right back there. Ideally, this is an emissions-based piece, right? So ideally, the exhaust is coming up, some of that is peeling off through here, the coolant is coming in, that's mixing and cooling off that exhaust gas, which is getting pumped right back into your intake again. Now, the idea is it's going to run it through one more time, burn it up, and then the end result of the exhaust coming out your tailpipe, it's a little bit cleaner. That's what they say. That's how it looks on paper.
Well, in theory, you're going to get a better, cleaner burn out the back. It'll be more emissions compliant. The reality is you're sacrificing a ton of performance. What you're doing is you're taking exhaust gases that are going to be well over 1,000 degrees, or much more than that actually can be, depending on turbocharge applications, and you're forcing that hot exhaust gas back into the engine. Now, you always hear Matt and I talking about you want a nice cool charge going into your engine, a lot of oxygen, you can make a lot of power. The idea here is you're killing horsepower, and unfortunately this is going to fail, and the result is you're going to have a major engine failure. Now, more often than not, what's happening is you're getting a leak where coolant's leaking back into the engine, you're popping a cylinder head, you're popping a gasket because you're hydraulicing the engine, and that's what's happened here, and it's a costly fix to have.
Okay, Dr. Doom, let's step off the ledge for a second, okay? Everything is fine because we can replace this with an upgraded model and everything is fine and that'll hold up for a while, or we can go one step better and just delete the whole thing with the EGR delete kit. Now, that's for off-road use only, which is of course what we're all about, so we're going to put that in there and actually take care of business and bring the horsepower back to this truck. But a lot of work has been done to get us to this point, so let's take a look at what we've done so far.
Yeah. Now, this EGR delete is billed as a 16-hour job. Let's show you guys some of the prep. Now, as we said earlier, you Powerstroke 6.0 owners should know that this EGR problem cannot be prevented in stock configuration.
This is going to happen sometime if you don't upgrade or delete the EGR cooler, and this is an extreme case. We start to notice how much water leaked into this truck once we saw the milky water coming out of the filter. That is proof that the EGR has failed and there's water in the system.
Once we start to take the turbo off, you can see much rust has began to form in the inlet tubes, and the turbo is all but seized up. Once we start taking out the oil cooler that is connected to the bottom of the oil filter, you can see what looks like a lake in the valley. It's completely covered with water.
Hey, I love lakes, you know, with the boats and the fishing and everything, but not when they're in the center of the engine. Once we start looking at the heads, we see the push rods were bent, the rocker arms were broken, and we need to make sure these heads aren't warped from the overheating.
So it's time to send those heads out to get them serviced.
This is the complete EGR delete kit that we got from KT Performance. This is nice because it has everything that we need to do to get this job done right. Need a hand, dude?
It's coming, buddy.
All right.
Now, one of the things I like about using this stuff from KT Performance is a complete kit, man. You're gonna get everything you need. You won't be chasing around for parts at the last minute, because these guys do this stuff all the time. They know the parts and pieces you need. If you do it once or twice like we do, man, you're never gonna get everything you want, and plus we're gonna get all the right gaskets and be able to do this thing the first time. So what we've got right here, man, it's a bit cumbersome. It's the entire exhaust manifold for this engine. What we're taking it out for is because part of our delete is we're gonna remove this section right here with the new one. Now, this is where you've got our EGR coolers coming off of this T-fitting, but also inside of here, you're not just deleting, there's a diversion plate that's actually forcing some of that air through that old EGR cooler. By eliminating that, we're going to get rid of a restriction in the airflow. Now we just have to take this whole thing apart, because if you look here, you can see there is just a ton of stuff and gunk inside of this, and you don't want that going through the turbo. So we'll take this apart. Matt will run it down to the parts washer for us, clean it all up, and then we can start assembling this all over once again.
I'll handle that for you.
You got it? Yeah. You get the tools here.
But anyway, don't worry about it.
Lots of gunk. Wow, that was fast. I don't think I've ever seen you move that quick.
Well, you know,
before.
they just dropped off lunch, so I'm highly motivated. And I got to tell you, for the record, these things were nasty on the inside, man. You said it earlier. We don't want that junk blowing back up into the turbo. Right?
No, that would not be good. All right, since we got everything laid out here on the table, what we're going to do is assemble it loosely here. We'll get the right setup drop it into place, and then we can tighten everything down. This way we make sure we've got all the right contours, everything going the right direction. Now that we've got this all assembled, the trick is getting it back into place where it was before, because you got to kind of fish it behind this heat shield. Once we go ahead and get our cylinder heads in place, we can tighten the exhaust to the cylinder heads, and then we can tighten everything into the right configuration.
Now, minus all the labor involved to do this EGR delete, there are two main parts to it. All right, the first one is that straight pipe that we replaced that T with. That's up in there, and that's good to go. The second one is right here. So just for reference, let's take a look at this. So here's where the EGR stuck out of on that side of the engine, right over there. So it came out this way. Like we said, this went back into the intake. The coolant flowed out. This little piece right here is like a replacement loop. So we can seal off the intake right here with this end, and the coolant will just come right in here and loop around and keep on going and doing what it needs to do. So that's pretty much it. Now the bottom line to this whole deal is that the EGR failed. When we come back from break, we're going to take a look at why it failed.
Hey, welcome back. Our cylinder heads are back from the machine shop. They are service assembled and ready to go back in our Powerstroke. Now remember, we pulled out the EGR system in this thing because it caused major damage. It failed and hurt the cylinder head, hurt the engine as a whole. So what we're going to do is delete it completely and now put this thing back together. Now it can be a little bit cumbersome getting a heavy cylinder head like this onto the block with the block still in the truck. But I have a lot of faith in Matt and getting it in position. I mean, he didn't just wake up with those kind of guns. You earned them, baby.
I have very low expectations on this. I would appreciate all the help I can get.
We're going to help him out a little bit by giving him a little bit of a clearance by not putting in the head studs on the block right now. So what we're going to do is kind of cheat a little bit to give us some clearance. Now the back part of the engine is going to want to hit up in the up underneath in the cab. So what we've done is set the studs in like this with a tie wire, so we won't have to try and fight them afterwards or try and fight the head over them and under the cab. So this should go in like a dream, buddy.
For the record, that weighs 40 more pounds than I do.
Oh, come on, Matt.
Look, dude.
You're an Adonis, son.
You can barely pick it up.
Ready?
And I'm standing on a oily frame. It's all good, dude.
I'll hold your hand for you.
I got those. Oh, yeah, that's all good. Yeah, all right. This is where we cut and go to a swoosh. Heads are going on, everything's coming back together, and progress is being made. But of course, we want to look at the root of the problem so that it doesn't happen again. The root of the problem for the EGR cooler was right here in the oil cooler. Now that sits right there, okay, so we take a look, have it removed. Oil comes in, coolant comes in, and that keeps the oil nice and cool so it can circulate throughout the engine and everything is good. Now we cut that baby in half to get a good look at it. Bruno and I love cutaways, right? So let's take a look. The taller channels are where the oil goes through, and the shorter channels are where the coolant goes through. So if you look at that, about half of those coolant channels are plugged up. As that coolant travels around, it's just going to pick up sediment and junk along the way and get gummed up. Well, now there's not as much coolant traveling through here, so your oil temperatures spike up on you, and the whole system doesn't run as cool, and then you get what we had here today.
Typically in one of these Powerstroke 6.0s, you're going to want your water and oil temperatures to be within 15 degrees, and a dead giveaway you're starting to have this problem is that your oil temperature is going to start to spike because you're not getting coolant through here. Now when this happens is usually when you get the failure with the EGR cooler, because the restriction of coolant going through here, well, is going to be restricted going through here. Now remember, this is mounted right off the turbo, so you've got that 1,000 plus whatever temperatures, gas is being forced through this cooler back into the engine. Well, if you've got no coolant going through here, it's going to happen is it's going to split like it did. So now you've got coolant mixing in with that air being forced into the engine. The end result in this situation was that it killed the head gasket and actually hydraulic the motor because it filled the cylinders with coolant, which is obviously not a good situation.
And obviously we don't want it to happen again. So we called up our buddies over at Diesel Site and they hooked us up with this coolant filter. So the coolant filter is going to go on and do what it says it does. It's going to filter out the coolant so that it doesn't get gummed up in here and it flows all around, and we don't have this problem, we don't have that problem, and all the other ones that we're facing right now. Now, as far as order of things goes, that goes on towards the end. So in between now and then, we still have a lot to do.
Now, if you're one of those guys sitting at home right now watching saying, oh my gosh, I've only got like 20,000 miles on my 6.0 Powerstroke, the end of the world is coming with all this. Well, this can be a great preventative measure because it can keep all of this from happening. You can put this on, pop the hood in about 20 minutes, and it'll really help keep that coolant flow going through not only your oil filter, but your EGR cooler as well, make your life a whole lot easier.
All right, dude, on to the next step.
All right. Hey, welcome back. With the intake off and while we've got access, is a great time to replace the problematic factory oil pump. And honestly, it was one of the wishes from our owner. He wanted to put in a higher volume oil pump, and his wish is our command. Now we've got to get the old one out of the way.
So again, we got with our buddies from Diesel Site, and they've got a couple different options. What's nice is they've got heavy duty replacements for the problematic stock ones, right? So here's the 05 to 07, we've got that, and this is the replacement for the 03 and 04, which is obviously what we're going to do. Now these are high pressure, high volume, heavy duty pumps, a lot of advantages over the stock one. All we have to do is get at it.
Yeah, the Adrenaline series is a nice upgrade. First of all, the real issue they have with the cast aluminum ones is really in the casting itself. It's a really porous casting. It has a lot of pitting in it, and unfortunately, that pitting results when you've got pressure is chunks of aluminum have actually gone into the pumps and broke them on numerous occasions. Obviously not what you want to have. When you talk about a cast aluminum pump like this, you don't have the capabilities of doing the porting you want to do because there isn't quite the material. This billet pump solves all those problems. Quite honestly, it's just an overall better pump.
Now, it's all about options too. Here you go, dude.
Thanks,
you looking
buddy.
for that?
Yep.
No problem. See, I was one step ahead of him. That's how we do it around here. The Adrenaline series is nice because let's say we just want to keep it running. We just want a bigger and better pump, but we're going to keep the regular standard injectors in there, and we're just going to use this truck as normal. They've got a pump for that with the Adrenaline series. But if we want to soup it up, throw on some monster injectors, make it into more of a race truck, you can get a higher volume pump for that as well. So whatever you want to do, the options are with you. When you take the old pump out, you want to make sure the alignment dowels came out with it because the new pump has dowels in there as well. Obviously, if you go to set this down on there and the old alignment dowels are stuck in the block, it's not going to line up right.
All right, let's get this lined up. Perfect. Hey, a little bit earlier we showed you guys a cutaway of an oil cooler that was all clogged up. Well, this is the actual culprit right here. Now what we need to do is press it out of the top cover, and then we can start putting the new one in place. Now, I know most of you guys are thinking, well, I've got one of these hydraulic presses at home. This will be a cakewalk. Well, by the off chance that you don't, you just use a socket like this and a hammer and tap it on either side, and you'll be able to press this thing out no problem. But since we got the tool, we might as well have a little fun with it, right? Just make sure you go back and forth so you don't split the case, because I'd imagine they're not easy to come by. And I think one more should do it. Voila. All right, drop this down here. And you can see the old oil cooler right here. Now we've got a new kit from KT Performance, so it's a new cooler. We've got all the O-rings and seals, everything we need to put it back in this cover. But before we do that, we need to go ahead and clean this thing up, and then we can start reassembling. So we've got the top cover back out of the parts washer. It is all cleaned up and ready to go back together. We've got new O-ring in here and our oil cooler. Now we put the new O-rings on these and lubed them up a little bit. Drop in a place like that. Got the last two fasteners in place. Now it's time to put on our oil filter housing. You can see there's a new O-ring going all the way around. That'll drop on here. And then we've got a bunch of these Torx head bolts to put in place and secure it. Then I can pass it off to Matt. We can continue our reassembly.
Before we bolt all that in place right here, we want to take a look at one more little piece, and that is this. It's a secondary oil filter right there, and it's the last line of defense between the oil that's sitting in this reservoir that gets shot over to the pump. So think about it, anything that's going into that pump is getting shot out to the injectors under pressure. So the last thing you want is a piece of anything going into those injectors, because that could end up being a high-dollar repair. So here's the deal, and here's the problem. The stock one that came from the factory, that stock filter right here, is made of cloth. And odds are really good that it's ripped somewhere along the way. This isn't a piece that's designed to be serviced, so you might not ever even look at it, but if it's got a hole in it, it's not doing the job. So the good thing is, while we've got everything ripped apart out here, and we got that new oil cooler kit, this comes with it as well. So you want to make sure that you definitely change this out, because, like that, done. That's a very easy install. That's my kind of job right there.
Yeah, you like the easy ones, don't you?
I do like that.
I mean, this wasn't too bad putting together itself. Here's our new cooler. You got their oil filter assembly right there. There's the housing for it, and that should pop into place, and then it's just continuing to bolt stuff back together.
I like it. All right, we have a lot more work to do. We need to go to break right now, but when we come back, we'll have a little bit more progress done. I promise.
You realize you spent the entire day laying down.
You realize it's all about ratings.
Hey, welcome back. We are continuing our EGR delete with our kit from KT Performance. The last piece of the puzzle is blocking off our intake right here and continuing to loop our cooling system so this thing will run nice and cool, but we won't have any of the issues with that EGR cooler.
Now this is going to be a really nice system, especially working in conjunction with everything else that we got. We've got the adrenaline high pressure oil pump, we've got that coolant filter, and both of which we got from the guys over at Diesel Site. So, looking good?
Yeah, that's cool.
All right, so a lot of that work is done, and those were fun projects. They're all going to work together to keep this truck on the road for years and years to come. But there's one more thing that we can do, the hot shot secret. And the best part about this is it's so easy.
Yeah, it's an easy fix to a problem that's pretty common with diesel trucks, and this one in particular. It all goes down to these hydraulic injectors. Now what happens is you've got thousands of pounds of pressure going through some very small orifices, and over time, and it doesn't take a lot of time, for stiction to build up inside of here, which that means is you've got oil burning on the inside, blocking up some of these passages and throwing these injectors out of time. It doesn't take a lot to do it, but you'll notice the difference right there. So the way we're going to treat it is by pouring a hot shot secret to the oil system itself. What it's going to do is remove the stiction not only in the injectors, but the turbo as well.
And we're going to add the hot shot secret fuel additive, because you think about it, with today's ultra low sulfur diesel fuel, it's just dirty. And the sulfur added a lot of lubrication, and that's not there anymore either. So what this does is it stabilizes the fuel, it changes the cetane rating, it cleans the injectors. It's just all around good for your performance.
Yeah, you're going to get faster starting, more power, and better fuel economy. You can't ask for more than that.
Yep, and it's easy to do.
Yeah, I like that part.
Right?